Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now in our 32nd episode of 2026. In Washington, Congress is in summer recess, with the House scheduled to return on August 31st and the Senate on September 14th. Last week before the recess, the Senate Agriculture Committee held a markup on the Farm Bill, but due to a lack of consensus on items unrelated to broadband, the committee did not advance the bill. Negotiations will continue through the recess period, and Republicans can bring the bill back up for a vote when the committee reconvenes in September. I'm currently here in Denver, Colorado for Mountain Connect, and last week the Fiber Broadband Association submitted comments to the Colorado Broadband Office in response to their draft Middle Mile Due Diligence and Strategic Roadmap Report. The Fiber Broadband Association applauds the Colorado Broadband Office's commitment to addressing and closing gaps in the state's middle mile infrastructure. And FBA encourages the Colorado Broadband Office to pursue permanent state funding for this initiative and include telecommunications stakeholders in working groups and planning discussions. FBA continues to support the expanded middle mile across the United States through public and private deployment as a force multiplier of last mile connections. Our members are committed to deploying the middle mile necessary to close the digital divide. The Fiber Broadband Association's next regional Fiber Connect workshop will be held in Omaha on Tuesday, August 25th. That's less than 2 weeks away. So if Omaha is going to be anything like Bozeman, which was absolutely fantastic, it's going to be just incredible. So I hope you'll join us. And then after Omaha, we'll be in Boston in September, Savannah in October, and Vancouver, British Columbia in November. We'll finish out the year with our premier member meeting in Islamorada in Florida in December. Last week on Five for Breakfast, our guest was Roger Entgener, the analyst and founder for Recon Analytics, discuss AI runs on fiber, how networks are evolving. Recon Analytics runs over 6,000 in-depth surveys every week focused exclusively on AI ecosystem. The data shows that more fiber subscribers use AI daily and have a much more intensive AI sessions than on cable, and AI engagement continues to dramatically drops with the quality of broadband connection. So it's less in AI engagement on cable, much less on fixed wireless, and then very, very low on LEO satellites. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Five for Breakfast, our guest is our good friend Darren Farnan, the general manager of United Fiber, to discuss Beyond the Build, monetizing fiber for long-term advantage. Darren has worked for United Electric Co-op since 1994 and serves as the general manager of United Fiber. Darren leads the development and operations of United Fiber Network, which has grown to 4,800 miles of fiber, over 80 employees, and over 50 million in annual revenue since turning up the first fiber customer in 2013. Currently, United Fiber serves over 43,000 combined residential and commercial fiber customers. Darren received his BS in business management and a MBA from Northwest Missouri State University, and he and his wife Chantel live in Maryville, Missouri, and they have 2 children, Brady and Maggie. Welcome, Darren, and for our audience, please type in your questions to go and we'll work those in discussion. With that, let's get the conversation started. So good morning, Darren.
Good morning, Gary. Great to be here with you again.
All right, so you just dropped your daughter, I guess that's Maggie, off at K-State, huh?
Yes, yeah, we're all back in the swing of things now, yes. So we one more year on the payroll, so yeah.
That's exciting, and we were just talking about Manhattan, what a beautiful little town.
Yeah.
That's what was so fun about going to Bozeman. It's just kind of, nice college town, but like a sort of resorty, but just a great little town. So it just really enjoyable. Hey, so let's, catch me up on everything going United Fiber. So what I love about you guys is being electric co-op. What do you have, about 7,500 electric members? Is that about right?
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
But yet, you have how many fiber members?
Yeah, so actually your numbers were pretty close. We just hit our 45,000 mark this month. So yeah, quite a I think when I joined you before, I think we might have been in the 20-some thousand range. And, every time we hit a goal, it's like, well, we didn't expect that. So now we can see how far we can take it. But yeah, so we've really been excited about the growth and, the continued success of the subsidiary. Like I said, about now, over 4 times the size of the electric co-op. So we're a little bit different than most electric co-ops in this business.
So how much revenue from the broadband business do you return to your electric members?
It's a significant amount. We've done some different studies on it, but I think it's safe to say that, each of our electric members benefit, whether that's through, shared services, through, offsetting some payroll and things like that. We do an arm's length transaction between the two organizations, obviously, but it's still been a major business, a major benefit. We were one of the highest, if not the highest, electric co-op rate in the state of Missouri when we started in this business back in, initially when we went for the grant back in 2010 that kind of got us started. And so we're always looking for ways, again, at only about 2.5 meters per mile. It's a tough economic, outlook whenever, when you have rising costs, we know what copper's done and wages and all different things. So it's really hard, and with such a rural footprint that we have on the electric side, it's really hard to generate a lot of new business. So I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but we're starting to see some exciting things on that front with, a lot of data center interest and other interest, as far as we've seen our usage continue to grow. But still, the fiber operation really was something we kind of started just to serve our members that really, at that time, 90% did not have access to even 4.1. So obviously a very, an area very much in need of some type of service, which is why we got into it, never really envisioning that we would, be doing the level of overbuilding and the things that we did. But that's where we are today.
Well, I mean, to me, it just seems incredible that, with 7,500 members that you can have nearly 50,000 broadband subscribers. So tell us, like even not all 7,500 are taking your broadband, what are you serving, about 4,500 of
That's
your
right. Yeah.
electric members? And tell us why it's what
we have some areas that, again, because it's such low density, we have some areas that some of the rural telephone cooperatives had built fiber already to some of our member areas. And in those areas, frankly, it just didn't make sense to try to, overbuild those areas that, were already, when we say 2.5 meters per mile, that could be a pump or a bin or a barn. I mean, in a lot of these areas, there may only be one house per mile, so it's very difficult to build in those areas. And as long as, the direction our board took with it, that as long as those members were served with at least 100 meg wireline service, then that was an area that we had the flexibility, to not build. And, again, because we're still utilizing, especially at those times, utilizing our members' money. So we have to make good decisions with that. So we felt like, as a board and as a management team, that was the route we decided to go.
And now you're built out to what, 60 communities?
Yes, that's about right. Mm-hmm. Now those communities can range from, a couple of hundred people to thousands of people, but yes, we serve pretty much our service area now. For folks that are familiar with Kansas City, if you take the north edge of Kansas City, kind of from the airport over and then go up north to the Iowa border, and we just have crossed over into Iowa recently with our first community build there, but that is kind of that Northwest Missouri footprint is where we are. So.
And so tell us about your strategy. Like, why wouldn't all the other electric co-ops around you follow your path? But they basically are inviting you in to say, hey, we're not planning to do this. Please come make sure our members have broadband.
Yes, that's been an interesting kind of path as we've gone down that. Like in 2014, we got approached by one of the communities that we were adjacent to. While we're very rural, we're very spread out, obviously, and a lot of communities just adjacent to our electric footprint. So Cameron, Missouri was the first community that kind of reached out. And then we had another smaller community that had really, really bad copper service. And there was some Wi-Fi going on, some, fixed wireless services in the area. But again, as we saw video at that time starting to come out, people just couldn't really use the internet to the level that they wanted to. And we talked to our board, we put together a business plan to build those two communities, a smaller one and Cameron, which is about a town of about 10,000. We built those two communities, and it was so successful that, our board saw, hey, this could actually be, a real benefit to the cooperative and help us offset some of the costs we see on that side and, get some additional benefit coming back in. And so we just continued that model. We grew organically, I would say, kind of and contiguously. So we just looked for new options as different communities. We looked at areas that were sometimes, communities that were in the most need that really didn't have any other services. And in most of our communities, we've had the luxury of being at it for a while. We've been building in those communities since 2014. So we're first fiber in almost every community that we're in. We do see more competition now, but that's, that first mover advantage is huge. So we've been able to go in and get really good take rates and just continue that. Again, it's just been progressive. We've just continued to expand out. And then to your point on the cooperative side, we were going down south, and like our membership area ends about St. Joe, Missouri, but that's about roughly halfway through our territory. And then Platte Clay Electric to our south, that kind of serves that growing north edge of Kansas City. Platte and Clay counties down there, some of the highest growth, counties in the state. We were already in the business. They felt like maybe it was too competitive in their areas, so they didn't really want to be in the market. But they welcomed us in, and we've gone down and, while we pay the same attachments and do all the same things that any other provider would do, they've been very supportive, whether it's community events or whatever that may be, and talking to their members. But that's been a huge success for us. It's given us access to that north kind of Kansas City market, that high growth that we see continued, subdivisions and commercial opportunities and things popping up that we just can take advantage of and really, really benefit the co-op. So.
I just love your story, because it's like the success story for rural electric co-ops. And, you're 2.5 meters per mile. So, the government would say, oh, we'll just throw some LEO satellites and rural America be fine. But the fact that you guys are building fiber in this rural low density and have a really robust business that's reducing your rate base. I mean, your rates for your electric business. I mean, it just seems like it's a win-win-win all across the board.
It has been. That's where we've kind of looked at obviously we've been able to take a part of, I think we've pulled in to date a little over 60 million in federal funding to help with this. But, often that's, as with some of the different programs, that was cents on the dollar of what was going to maybe some of the tier one providers. But we've been able to that's been one big aspect, whether that's through, back when we started with ARA, CAF, now RDOF, ARPA, and looking at BEAD. So these are programs that we've been able to take advantage of and help, grow that extremely rural footprint. But then the other part was building these communities. While that brought services to those communities that maybe they didn't have and increased opportunities there, it was really a huge part of growing that density or averaging that density out. So while that was, beneficial, extremely beneficial for the region, it was also beneficial for us as an organization, because it kind of decreased the risk of, having such low density markets and kind of balancing that out from a, financial standpoint.
So talk a little bit, you guys are doing a little bit of BEAD. What's going on with that?
So we're in the process. We still have not signed our agreement. We're coming right up to it with the state of Missouri, continuing to evaluate it. As you know, it's a bit of a moving target, right? To say the least. We've had, some of with the version 8 fabric that has just been released, that some of our locations have been pulled out. I think I've seen some of your information talking about this. The success of what a lot of other fiber builders and others have done have kind of decreased, I'll say improved, I should say, the what's going on in our rural markets. And we're seeing more and more, kind of that growth and customers getting served that were on their original map. So we're still just trying to adjust our financial pictures and things like that. But we're heavily in the middle of that right now, and we're going to be making a decision here within just a few weeks. So.
Okay, and then you guys are still completing your RDOF commitments.
Correct. Yes, we're in good shape on that. We're well past our thresholds. There was actually, with our BEAD program, there's some overlap. I shouldn't say overlap. It's a bit of a patchwork quilt where we still see some BEAD opportunities, as we've seen with RDOF and CAF and others. But that we're just trying to make sure that to complete some of our RDOF areas, that we know where we're at with BEAD, so that we make the best, most efficient build in those areas.
During my preamble, I was talking about here in Colorado, the state working on middle mile. And to me, middle mile's key it's a whole lot easier to reach, these hard to reach folks if you have a decent middle mile infrastructure. So you guys, tell me about what you're doing with middle mile and some of the initiatives you have going on.
Yeah, we've continued to try to get a little bit. We've seen the overall cost of our bandwidth continue to decline, which is great, right? But sometimes that availability, when you're subject to a single provider in a lot of those markets, it makes us somewhat limited, especially as we're serving, hospitals, 911 centers, things like that. We need some diversity and things in our routes. And while we've been okay at that, we're trying to get better. What we did most recently is we wanted to take a little bit more ownership, a little bit more control of that future. And so we worked with 2 other electric co-ops and 8 telephone co-ops in northern Missouri and formed a company called Bridge Broadband. So we've actually formed our own middle mile company, utilizing some of our own assets from each of the different organizations and creating a nice footprint across northern Missouri to start off. And that's going to give us a lot of flexibility and duplicate routes, because as we all know, our bandwidth requirements are going up. I know you talked a little bit in your preamble about, what we're seeing on fiber usage, the amount of things we're seeing with, with chat and ChatGPT and all the different, services that are out there, and that continued push on upstream bandwidth, just all the different things we see. We know that demand is going to do nothing but grow. And we wanted to have a little bit more control of our own destiny, our own future, and make sure that that our networks are as reliable and redundant as they can be.
Well, that's great. And so that's not only northern Missouri, but you're down all the way to the Lake of the Ozarks?
That's correct. Yeah, I should say, basically to central Missouri. So it's quite a footprint across basically the middle part of Missouri up to the northern borders.
Well, that's awesome. So you mentioned a little bit about data centers. So, AI's here. I mean, there's nothing that you can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's here, it's pervasive. It's going to be amazing. Roger last week, he was saying that on his surveys that if you, put us in the same question, is this a threat or is this an opportunity? More people would say, oh, they're scared of it. But if you ask those questions independently, more people are optimistic. So tell us about what's going on with data centers. How are you guys going to play in that? Obviously, you're electric utility, so you're the perfect fit for being able to provide both fiber connectivity and the electric capacity. But so what are you guys seeing?
Well, really at this point, with the electric cooperative hat on, we have a duty to serve. So if those are coming into a market and we get requests, then we have to evaluate that, right? And we really the co-ops in the state of Missouri all work through a single Associated Electric, which is kind of our generation company for basically all of our members own up through the way that the system works in Missouri. So, and there's just not a lot of excess capacity out there. That's been the kind of the long pole in the tent for a lot of these type of services is, can they get the electricity that they need? I mean, obviously they need bandwidth, they need water, they need all those other things, but electricity has been a pretty key component on location. And a lot of those are being supplemented with, whether that's natural gas plants or whatever that may be. But we've had more requests, well beyond what we even serve today, with our full electric footprint. So it's just one of those things that we continue to evaluate opportunities. There's, as there's so much noise in that market. We get a lot of requests, but you don't know what's real and what's not, and you just continue to kind of work through that and look at the opportunities we do have to serve. But again, there's so many factors that go into it. And obviously we see it on our end. We, with a lot of our county commissioners dealing with, like you said, both the good and the bad of what these type of opportunities can bring. So I would say we're observers and, responding to requests at this point. And that's kind of where we are as an organization. But I think it's something that, I think even somewhat the definition of a data center is interesting because, we've talked about edge computing and other things for a long time. So, we've heard everything from, little micro type, if you want to call it a micro data center, edge compute, whatever that might be, located at substations, to, obviously the huge, data centers that we've seen in other parts of the country. So I think it's a little bit all over the board right now.
I mean, you can basically buy your own NVIDIA Spark for what is it, $6,000. So,
Right.
I absolutely believe that people are going to have, whether they have a GPU rack in their basement or, we'll see these little micro data centers at cell sites, or even, they have canopies now, like, you have it, the gas stations and so forth that have little data centers in the canopy with solar panels on top. So there's all kinds of innovative way to have this, because people think about the training, the models are all going to be in these large data centers, but the inference is all going to be on the edge. And so,
right.
And we had a roundtable with some small providers yesterday, just a private Fiber Broadband Association roundtable, and just with some AI experts, and just discussing, how do small providers, rural providers play in the AI age. And, if there's not a data center, that's only one element. It's really about inference, and how are you going to get, you want to reduce latency, just like we saw with, we kind of put it back to Netflix. Back in the day when, here I'm in Colorado, I can remember the CTO of Quest at the time saying, when Netflix went from shipping CDs to streaming, that said, we'll pay all your postage if you just continue to ship CDs, because you're driving so much traffic across our network. But then they quickly found out that as they drove more traffic, people needed more bandwidth, and then it ended up quickly being a great revenue opportunity for the operator. But are you guys, beyond just surveying data centers, are you making any adjustments to, or kind of strategizing on how you guys would play with more edge compute?
A little bit. We haven't had a lot of demand, again, just because we are so rural. So we've had those discussions, but obviously, substation locations make great opportunities for the way they're fed. And honestly, a lot of our fiber network has mimicked our electric network. So again, a lot of our OLT locations, things like that, tend to be placed in those same locations where we have, multi-source electrical paths, we have multi-source fiber paths, and backup generation, things like that. So I feel like we have a pretty strong network, to help facilitate some of those type of locations, but it's still early for us right now.
So how are you using AI? So one of the things in our roundtable, a lot of our small rural operators are using AI for customer service, for optimizing operations, for, just basically better network management. Are you using AI tools? And
we are. It's been a little bit more on. We've done a lot of AI work on our some of our reporting, things like that. We've done a lot of things, I would say, departmentally, but we're working closely with our vendors. As far as for some of the other things you touched on, to go deeper on the customer service end, on the network health end. We're kind of working through those phases right now and implementing some things currently. But once again, still somewhat early in that process. I think we've looked at internal workflows and gained some advantages there. And I think it's, what is it, Amari's law or whatever? We overestimate the time frame something happens and underestimate the scopes. And I think that's probably where we're at today, right now, with AI. So.
Well, listen, I want to grab one of our audience questions. I think it's a great question. So basically it says, are you leveraging your pole infrastructure and building aerial, or do you have long rural power spans, or how do you overcome this obstacle?
Right. Yeah, it's definitely something that, as we did our initial builds on our existing network or existing electric infrastructure, yes, we had long pole links. We had to strengthen, we had to go in and either put new poles in certain locations, and we still have to do that at times. But what it did is it provided actually a good benefit for us on the electric side as well, because it strengthened that infrastructure, because a lot of that infrastructure has been out there since the 40s and 50s. It's amazing that I was looking at one of our lines that took off from our main Maryville office, and I was talking to our operations manager. I said, well, I know that line still looks that line looks like it's in really good shape. That must be fairly new. It's like, that was the first line I built when I started back here in, 70 something. So it's like, so while we take good care of what we have, poles still do get bad. You know, different lines have to be replaced, things like that. So it has strengthened our electric infrastructure because we have, you know, tightened up our span lengths. We've gone to larger poles, things like that. So I'd say it's been a benefit to us on that front. But because of the cost benefit you get, you know, we've always figured we can do aerial at about 30 to 40% of the cost of underground. And so it gives you a huge benefit as far as the initial investment, obviously. So we do like aerial where we can use it. And then, but in a lot of our markets, we typically have done that on our poles and on Platte clay in a lot of areas, but there's still areas where we have to dip and go underground, even on that existing infrastructure, just like, and then most of our community builds are all underground. So.
Yeah, but you guys aren't, I mean, you certainly have weather events. You know, when I was saying last time I was in Manhattan, I went up to Salina and they were out of power. They had like 120-mile-an-hour winds that came in the night before and took out all the power. Mm-hmm. and so forth. So, you know, Kansas, Missouri definitely has some weather events.
Right. And we have found, and we've had that happen. We've had poles knocked over. I will say the fiber's been more resilient than we even estimated. Because a lot of times, I mean, obviously making sure that the linemen or other linemen coming in don't cut something just to get it out of the way. But we've been amazed how often that poles have gotten knocked down and the fiber continues to work. So trenchers and backhoes are much more unforgiving, you know. So we found out that usually the length of our outages and things are much worse on underground cuts than they are on pole issues, you know. So.
Yeah, no. The last time I was in Colorado, someone said that if you're out hiking and you get lost out here in Colorado, the best thing is to pull a piece of fiber out of your pocket and bury it in the ground because there'll be a backhoe there in a minute.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Hey, so let's get to average revenue per user. So what are you guys doing to really build your ARPU?
We're doing a lot on that front. You know, we've been really building aggressively over the last few years. We've slowed just a bit the last 12 to 18 months and really tried to focus on backfilling our areas. I mean, because we have a really good take rate. I think overall we're about 46% penetrated, which is really good, but there's always a lot of room for improvement. We've done a lot on the MDU front. That's the apartment complexes and things as we've gotten into. That was something we weren't as familiar with early on, and we've really made a lot of progress there. I think we have over 8,000, you know, potential MDU units right now, and doing a lot on that front. We're doing MVNO cell phones. Just started that last month with a partner. Doing those type of services. And then we've done a lot on really managed Wi-Fi, whether that's on the residential or the commercial side. We do use Calix with the app that we've, you know, given our own brand to and really pushed that. We've done outdoor Wi-Fi. We've done a lot on the commercial front. As a matter of fact, one of the most successful ones we've had is kind of a managed Wi-Fi service on the commercial end that's increased our ARPU on average. I think we have around 3,000 total commercial subscribers. Obviously, not all those are small offices, but in a lot of our small offices, I think we have over 450 that have taken our managed Wi-Fi service, and that increases our ARPU on average about 20%,
Wow.
Which is surprising in those areas. So that's been a benefit, I think, that we just try to do more and more because it's a benefit for the customer. And I think the more we do and the more we manage for the customer, you know, the more sticky those services are, right? And we've also done a lot on the phone system side. That's an area that we've seen in a lot of our rural communities that there's not a lot of managed phone services out there anymore. And so they need help often with that. So we can kind of come in, we can provide, you know, managed Wi-Fi for their office or even warehouses, things like that. We can do take care of their phone services that they have. Which is where we see the bulk of our phone, you know, success, and you know, kind of tie all that together and really be a kind of a partner with the business rather than just selling, you know, just a data service alone. So we've found that that's been very successful for us, and I think there's more and more opportunity on those areas. So.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, we certainly see a lot of attach rates on mobile service to fiber. That's a great strategy. Our audience asked, or, you know, is curious who you're partnering with, if you can say who you're working with on cellular and why.
Sure. We're with NRTC,
okay.
the National Rural Telecommunications Cooperative, and they've had an offering, in that market for years. I mean, gosh, as long as I can remember, at least 20 years that they've had an offering. We just felt like the time is right. We've started to see more and more success. If you see the reporting from the tier ones, that more and more people are taking that. And we just didn't want our customers to perceive that they had to go to someone else to have that type of an offering. They offer service through multiple back-end companies, whether that's an AT&T or Verizon. So that was a benefit as well. And like I said, just because we'd had a long-standing partnership with them, we've worked with them, and they do our after-hours phone service. We used to do Direct TV service with them. We've had ever since I've been here, we've had some type of operational, work that we've done with NRTC. So that was just the most comfortable fit for us.
Well, Darren, I love talking to you. It's just so impressive what you're doing both on the electric and broadband side. You guys, just knocking it out of the park. It's inspiring. So thank you for sharing your latest update with our audience.
You bet. Well, we appreciate all you do, Gary, to bring, kind of so much recognition to the fiber industry, and then for sharing our story as well.
Well, I hope you guys get together with me next Wednesday. We're going to have Janet Reberg, the president and CEO-elect of EPB, discuss EPB's quantum computer from municipal electric or energy to quantum tech. I can't wait to talk to Janet. EPB is just doing some amazing things. So we'll see you guys next Wednesday. And Darren, good luck with your daughter's junior year. And I hope to talk to you more about what you guys are doing at United Fiber sometime soon.